I'm here in a very, very nice place because I am about to interview a great lady, Brettney Perr from Obscuram company, and she is a very multi-talented lady, which shows in all of her different jobs, from acting, being an artist, busy in the film industry, a very great personal empowerment coach, and her work to bring people together and share their story, which I think is a very great thing that she does as well. And I know Brittany because I did an assessment with her to find my real purpose. And she brought me basically back in touch with that so I can use it to influence my future in a very positive way. And it was really a great experience, Brittany. It gave me so many new insights, especially in the dream that I had let go of. That
Mm.
like it's not possible. And I came back in touch with that. And so, well, I can use it to open my heart for that again and bring it in because it's still in there.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. And today I mean, she does a lot of things, but we have a special topic for today because Brettney is also the fear specialist. And there is a lot of fear around in this world, especially in the last coming years. So that subject, we're going to talk about that. And believe me, she knows a lot about that, and she's good at her work as a fear specialist. So, Brittany, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me here, Carla.
Ladies like you are really, really want to have here. That's really great. I love it
Uh,
myself. So,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about your journey? What brought you to do what you do now?
Oh, my journey is a lifelong journey of learning, self-guided learning. I had a lot of alone time as a kid. I grew up in a haunted house, which I have a post on Obscuram that people can review about that and why I have a very scientific, analytical mind. But I had a lot of alone time to get through my own struggles, to overcome a variety of obstacles, to face my fears, and even dealt with trauma in my childhood because, like, part of that is kind of neglect. I wouldn't say it's quintessential neglect of like being left alone. Like, there's people there, but people that just had barriers in different ways. And my mother was not the happiest of people. She has some narcissistic tendencies, and that did some harms to me. Definitely, like,
Yeah.
definitely have trauma when you go to a parental or an authority figure for nurturing and you're scared and terrified by the end of that. So I became a person who's able to do everything. So for better or for worse, a lot of people are like, well, that comes from trauma. Yeah, that comes from trauma. Now it's my superpower.
Yeah.
And now I get the ability to speak with people that are like me, help them to shift these things that have been born from pain into something that is actually a superpower. So the people that I deal with are empaths, metaphysical practitioners, and multi-talented professionals. And a lot of people are like, well, being an empath means you're hypersensitive to the world around you because of trauma. But that sensitivity to the world around you because of trauma means that you can pick up on things other people don't. Like, you're aware of, hey, we need to get out of this space. There's something weird going on there. And these people were engaged in the conversation, had no clue. You might have saved lives that day.
Yes.
So these are things that, even though it comes from trauma, it's not a bad thing. So breaking down those barriers around, well, this is bad and I shouldn't know, take it for the blessing that it is and just take that from the situation. So it has been a lifelong journey, to be honest, of having a lot of that fear stimulus, especially, like, people may or may not believe this. It's up to them. But growing up in a haunted house, having apparitions appear out of nowhere, it's like someone breaking into your house. Like, it's scary in that way. So how do you deal with that?
That's also where some sorry for breaking in, but that's also where a lot of fear I mean, all came together. You had like all different kinds of aspects that
Yeah.
fear grew bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Like you have no control over when that apparition is going to appear. You just
Yeah.
don't unless you're a psychic medium already. But even psychic mediums have a hard time setting boundaries with an energetic being like that.
Especially.
So it feels like home invasion. So deal with that stimulus for 19 years of your life.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, eventually my way of handling that was going into scientific analytical and starting to question that. And that has really
May I
been,
ask a question on
yeah,
that? You say that was your way of dealing with that. You did
yes,
that on purpose so you could kind of change the way that everything that was going on inside you, that you would be able to turn that around?
yeah.
Okay.
Curiosity is the greatest fear killer because you're questioning, well, all right, I'm here, this stuff's going around me, it's terrifying, but what's really happening to me? What are they doing to, okay, they're popping up willy-nilly, it's terrifying. Okay, what is this? Like, what is this exactly? Okay, I have time to think about this. I have time to run some experiments. Let's correlate this with other things going on in the household. So when I grew up, there were VHS tapes. I've just dated myself. So that how the image comes off the VHS tape is it's magnetized. It's just this little, you pull it out of the cassette tape and it's a black strip. And you're like, you can bring it up to the sun. It's not like film. There's no image on it. So how is this playing? How am I viewing this? And then taking that out of that context and into the bigger scheme of things, like VHS tape is now on the VHS player, but now I'm bringing this idea into the household and going, okay, these things are appearing. They're playing in my household. There's something to do with magnetism here. So it's once you bring in curiosity, once you start figuring something out for what it is, what it's doing, and how you're allowing it to impact you completely shifts once you start being curious about it.
And with that, the emotion shifts, I guess.
Absolutely. You won't be as terrified or as terrorized. Like there's always the option of running away, but why? Like, here, have more of the same struggles in your life or even worse. But I didn't. It felt more being in that space. Okay, I'm bound to this space because my family's here, because there's food, there's shelter, there's water. So in that moment, I learned to face my fears and face them daily. Like having a parent, and my brother really associates with my mom. And so I got it from him too. That was what I lived in. You're going to live either way. Like people in territories that are actively being bombed still live. They still survive. They still do life. And it's a matter of bringing that into the fear paradigm of like, how are you going to do life? Yeah, you're under stress. Yeah, you're dealing with this. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
So
but basically it is the story that we put on a certain emotion, that we connect with a certain emotion, that kind of makes the emotion. Because when, like with this, like suppose that we would say, a mother would say to the kid like, hey, I love you, and it would slap it in the face. And it says like, that's how I show my love, because I do that because I love you. Then there's a completely different connection with love than somebody who has the experience of, hey, I cuddle you and I call that love. So we connect a certain story, and that's what we have with these situations. You connect that with the fear, and now you change the whole story on that, and that's where also the emotion changes.
Yeah. So part of the things that really helped me was having that alone time so that I could sit here and ponder, like, do I like this? And the answer was no.
There you go.
So it's not carrying the abuses forward. It's going, I don't like this. What's a better way? So that once again, it comes back to that core ideology of sticking with curiosity. So like there was a period of time where our family grew up in Christianity, and a lot of that perpetuates and encourages self-righteousness, which once I read the Bible cover to cover 3 times, I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't right at all. And so I noticed the pain that I was causing others. So another thing that I focus on are behavior patterns, universal concepts. If you slap someone, they're going to react in pain, right? And that's going to upset them.
Yeah.
So upset is a cornerstone of something that's not working.
True.
So it's, what do I want to create in the world? Do I want to create more pain, or do I want to create healing? And my choice is to create more healing. I don't like the pain. Like I've experienced enough of it on my own. I don't like it.
But how then, Brettney, could you, because a lot of people say like, I don't like it and I don't want it no more, but they still struggle because the feeling, the memory, it's all connected, and they keep struggling to change that around. So how do you do that?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
So acknowledging it, like seeing it fully. A lot of people run away from pain.
Yes.
Instead of putting in preventative measures. So and I can only speak for American culture. In American culture, we're all about Band-Aids. We're not about finding the source of what's happening. So that was the first thing. And this is my story of with the medical industry. I grew up having sinus infections constantly, and they would just put on medications to bandage it. And I'm like, one time I asked the doctor, because I was tired of it. I had heard a teacher who was saying, yeah, I got sinus infections and had a surgery. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure out why I'm getting all these sinus infections. This is brutal. The medication I'm being put on is making me sicker. It is making me worse. I want to stop this from where it starts and figure it out. So I asked the doctor, I'm like, what do you think could be causing this? And he's like, just take the medications.
Okay. That didn't help you.
No. And that's was a reflection of what I experienced in my childhood. It's like the authority figures are not going to help you. How do you help yourself?
Yes.
So that's when I started figuring things out, started doing my own studies of how I could prevent it, because I was tired of getting sicker because of the medications. I get the side effects. I cannot do Western medicine. Well, it does not work with, and I wanted to start these things, stop this where it starts. I want to prevent it from happening. I don't want to be down for weeks at a time. I want to live my life. So, and I knew that it wasn't going to come from a person who was fueled by their ego, just shelling pills.
Yeah.
So I had to take that on myself and take that journey on myself. And I'm grateful for it. So that's another part of it is when you're dealing with something, you have to face it head on. You have to look at it. You have to observe it. You have to question it. Like, why is this happening? And then once you acknowledge it fully, have gratitude for it. Like, okay, I understand this pain is just to push me. And sometimes it's to push me in the right direction. Sometimes it's to push me into something that I've declared for my life, because that declaration is not pulling me there. And I'm not seeing where that actually lies or how that plays in the bigger scheme of what it is that I get to create.
So it's like a lesson.
Yeah.
Like whenever something comes on your path that you don't like, and especially when it's that big or it's like a physical problem, there's a lesson behind it. And you're saying if you face that lesson, if you go into the feelings and everything that's there, like put that mirror in front of you and see what's all there, what's all behind it. And then acknowledging that is where you can change the whole story, the emotion, the feeling, and basically how you go around with that in the future.
Yeah. So, and it's a choice to see it as learning. Like that is the real choice in it is this happened. What do I get to do with it? Because I have all the power and what I get to do with it from here on forth.
I love the
So
way you say that, Brettney, and the way you
yeah,
look at this. I think this is a real nice example for people. You're saying this strong from your
yeah,
strength, from your heart, with a very serious face, like the power is there.
yeah,
So you have to take that power in that decision,
yeah,
take responsibility, actually.
yeah. And I know people don't like the phrase of, this happens for a purpose and happens for a reason,
I
because
know.
the purpose or the reason is what you make out of it. It's a very not well thought out phrase that has done harm to a lot of people. It's like, well, this horrific thing has happened. This amount of people are dead now. There was a purpose to that. And it's like, no, you get to figure out like how this shifts your life. You get to figure out what you get to do better. You get to figure out, am I going to be a therapist now that looks at the people that are silent and really sits with them so that this won't happen again? Am I going to travel to another country to create peace between these two countries? Am I going to step up in my government? Am I going to do this? Like, what gets to change now that this has happened? Now that you know the consequences of these actions, now that you've faced your fear, looked at it, figure out what's happened, what is really going on here. How do you get to change that for the better in your life and then in the lives of others? So that's where I come at that. Even though the phrase loosely means that, that's where I've expanded on it to make it make sense to people that have been through
Yeah.
a lot of trauma and a lot of pain. So
Yeah, people need to hear that you went through that to believe you. Somehow people, yeah, they don't believe it otherwise. Like, yeah, you see, hear that a lot. Oh, you don't have that experience, so you don't understand me. That's not true. Not everybody tells their own experience. I'm happy you are doing that. And that
yeah,
inspires other people to do the same. And that's also
yes,
what I like about Obscurum, that you really empower people by letting them tell their story
mhm,
and make sure people respect that story. Because it's not about what is the truth, it's about how do we feel it and
yeah,
what do we do with it, and respect that we do it in a different way than other people do. I love
yes.
that from you. It's great. Yeah, on her
Thank you. Yeah.
website obscurum.com, I mean, there's such great stories on there that
Mhm.
are really, really inspiring. So I really would recommend going there and look at those stories. And yeah, feel free to share it there also. So yeah, it's inspiring, and you do that in a very inspiring way as well.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, hey, I feel very inspired by you. So, and if I look at those videos, I'm
Mhm.
not the only one. And I know
Yeah.
you from other places, and I know you inspire a lot of more people than that. So
Yes.
grateful for that already, Brittany, that you are
Mhm.
simply that you exist and that you do this to inspire people, to help people, and to change stories, head stories around, and with that change lives around.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see that why that's a very important topic for you. So we can change
Yes.
lives.
Yeah. And the biggest part of that is trauma is an invisible wound. I mean, there is physical trauma, but what about the mental trauma that people who have dealt with others who have narcissistic traits and have been at the hands of abuse from them? That those are wounds that people can't see. And the most interesting thing is there's different reactions to that trauma that people don't recognize or don't understand or don't take the emphasis to really figure out like how to bridge that gap with others and to connect and create healing.
Yeah.
So, the internal wounds are the hardest ones to heal because you can't just go to a doctor and have, a bone set or have sutures put in. Like those wounds are very real, but you don't have access to them. And it's up to the person who is dealing with that trauma and dealing with the wounds to heal that. So the more help that I can give to people with those internal wounds, the better, because there is a lot of misdiagnoses on things. There's a lot of misunderstandings, Like when I do my talk about fear, the first thing I ask is, how do you experience, like, what does it mean to you to be scared? Show me a reaction of that. And people are like, oh, like hiding. And I'm like, fear is fight or flight, which is the most known regard of that. But there's also the additions of freeze and fawn. So fawn is more like Stockholm syndrome, associating with the person who has done you harm.
Yeah.
And like gushing on them, love bombing them, that sort of thing. Freeze is exactly what it is. Like you're just deer in headlights. But people forget that it's not hiding. Road rage is fear-based. What are they afraid of? Could be having their sense of pride injured. It's still an injury. They're still seeing it as very real to react in a way that brings on rage. Yeah. It's still fear. Like those internet fights that you have, that's still fear. Like it's all fear. And once you see it as fear, it's like, oh, wow, I'm sorry that upset you. I see that you're scared right now. I see your pain. Literally on TikTok, like someone's upset at me because I'm a coach. I don't want to be a therapist. I don't want to be a licensed therapist. And there's very well thought out and well-researched reasons as to why. But I work with therapists. I love my friends who are therapists. I can pick their brains. I hang out with Harvard graduates, Princeton grads. Like I don't mind talking to professors, hanging out with professors, picking their brains. I actually love doing that. So like I get the information. So regardless of if I'm in a classroom or not, I still get the information that is being taught in these classrooms. But instead of just letting it marinate in a classroom while I'm learning all this other data and information, I'm actually acting on it immediately. I take it out. I do observations. I do my own research. I'm constantly questioning, constantly researching, constantly changing things up. So that's why I say I'm an autodidact and a polymath, because once you understand, for me as a polymath, like I started with human behavior. I would just observe people. Well, actually, I started with animals. So I observe animals, observe their reactions, observe their emotions, observe their behaviors. And then I expanded that to, okay, let's take these concepts to people. What are the universal ideas that if I do this in any culture in the world, it's going to create upset? So there are some specific universal laws within our mainframe as human beings that are cross-cultural. So what are these things? What is that makes humanity really human and makes the human experience the human experience? And then everything out from there is highly connected and correlated. So when I learn new things, I bring those learnings into those key concepts and experiment with them in a variety of different ways. So
and you experiment on yourself with that too, to get the real experience.
Yes. Yeah, there is definitely a self-reflective dynamic of, and I call this cognitive empathy, where if I put myself in someone else's shoes, am I going to like what I'm doing?
Yeah.
How would I feel from someone who's witnessing me do this to them? So once
that's basically the best question people can ask. Like, put yourself in the situation of the others and experience what happens, and then think again what you want to do. If you want to have the same reaction or a different reaction.
Exactly. So, and I consider that cognitive empathy, which is lacking from a lot of our culture. We hear that phrase of put yourself in someone else's shoes, walk a mile in their shoes, yet nobody's really doing it. But it is something that can be taught. So empathy, on the other hand, empathy as in like associating with another's emotions in certain ways, it's challenging. Like being an empath is different.
Like and I think we can be having that empathy, but if you have not had the situation yourself, you still can be empathic
Yeah.
but there's a slight difference because you don't really know the emotions from experience. You know them from hearsay, but the experience itself, having that, is different. But yeah,
Yeah.
then you still can be empathic. So though,
Or you can be an empath, experience the emotions and not know why. So
yes,
cognitive empathy brings in the, oh, this is why this happened. And maybe doing that behavior shouldn't happen again.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so yeah, there's a lot of different viewpoints and addendums to just a raw empathic ability. And yeah, a lot that can be done to navigate trauma. And that's another thing that I bring in is by not being, and I'm going to say programmed within a college system, because it is highly programmed. Like, you have to do this because I'm the teacher, I'm the authority. You have to do this in this way, or else you're doing it wrong, which is not true. There's a lot of one size fits all dynamics that are shelled out there. And in our ever changing world with ever beautifully diverse people, neurally, culturally, it doesn't work in that way. And
especially since they all have their own experiences as well and their
yeah,
own beliefs, etc.
exactly. And, I experienced it in the physical, where by my freshman year of high school, I was 160 pounds. So I knew very
I
well that
saw that. Yeah,
yeah, I
I
know
did not
very
even
well.
recognize you on that. Gosh.
Yeah. So I know very well that one size fits all does not. It's a misnomer. It
Literally.
does not work.
No, that
So
was a literal experience. Yeah.
yeah. So I took that concept and I've expanded it exponentially and found out that, yeah, by expanding this concept and acknowledging one size fits all does not work for all, you get a little more traction in the right direction, because that is still a narcissistic tendency of
Yeah.
putting people in a little box that they don't
Yes.
really fit in. I mean, once again, there are core concepts that are ubiquitous, but when you get into more of the specializations fail a certain number of the market. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to carry that legacy forward, because once again, it's still a narcissistic trait. Like, one of the things that people don't realize with people who have narcissistic tendencies, and I say tendencies because this is not the actual diagnosis of narcissism. With
Yeah.
narcissistic tendencies, they put characters on people, and then they stimulate those people in different ways. Maybe it's passive aggressive, maybe it's physical, can be a bunch of different ways that they corral that person, and like a herding dog herd sheep, put that person into that role. And that person is definitely not that role that they've been put into.
They
So
don't, a lot of times, they don't even realize that they are being pushed in that role.
yeah, it just feels like trauma. It's very traumatizing.
Yes.
So that is what our society is encouraged, though, which is why it's so prevalent now, which is why you see so many people now having these expressions of narcissistic tendencies and don't even realize the harm that they're causing, or what they're really doing, or the harm that they're bringing back on themselves, reinforcing their trauma.
Yes. Yeah, because
So
that's what they say, yeah, that narcissism has a lot to do with the trauma experience that people had. And I mean, officially, there's like some different ways to look at it, but yeah, most of it comes down to trauma. Can you explain a little bit more? Because a lot of people know the word narcissistic, they know a little bit, heard something here, something there. How would they recognize that they are in a narcissistic relationship?
gaslighting. So being told what you're feeling, even though that's not what you're feeling. Like, I could say to you, oh, I know you're upset right now. I know you're so angry right now because, I just said this, which is not true. Like, you're not upset. You're not angry. Where is that coming from? But then they constantly drum it in and drum it in, drum it in, so that you feel like you're crazy. Like you've experienced something like, hey, you hit me last night. I didn't hit you. What are you talking about? Okay, maybe I need to go to a psych ward. Or eventually, people do have a mental breakdown if it keeps happening. Like they really force you to disconnect from others. They look one way forward facing in public, and then behind closed doors, they're completely different. They are very much driven by their protection system, also known as the ego, which it's ready for fighting. Like it's literally primed and ready. It's like putting on armor with spikes. So if you come up to hug that armor, you're going to get stabbed, right? You're going to feel like metal. It's going to be very uncomfortable. It's going to be very abrasive to someone outside of them who might be close to them.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who's not that close to them and you're looking at them from a distance, you're like, wow, that's a magnificent shiny silver armor. Look at how that's glinting in the sun. Same person, different experiences from one who is closer to them to one who is not as close to them. So
what about jealousy?
Oh yeah, that's part of it too. Definitely. That's how they take people away from others who might give them a sense of their sanity. And what's even worse, which, this is the current discussion on my TikTok, where I offended someone on saying therapy is not the end all be all. Some therapists do some amazing harms, and then people don't seek therapy after they've been harmed by therapy, even though there are some great therapists, and I believe that they should be in therapy, is that a narcissist or people with narcissistic tendencies can manipulate therapists. Therapists are only human. They're not trained to deal with manipulation. They're not trained to see through a person who is a pathological liar.
And
Even
they
though
do it in a very convincing way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And I experienced that myself, where I was with a couples therapist, and I didn't feel like I could trust her. I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't feel like she understood me. I, stood there and was like, at one point, the ex that I was dealing with, he said something, and I say, prove it. Prove that this happened. Because this did not happen. And she stood up for him. Well, he just got like flustered, started going to a meltdown. And she's like, oh, he doesn't have to. And I'm like, I'm done. And did she ask me for feedback? No.
Well,
They don't ask for feedback.
I think that's why she didn't ask.
Yeah. Like they don't know that their stuff is working or not working. They don't take a census afterwards.
Yes.
They don't, like, I felt complete, like, you're a licensed professional. If I come at you saying, hey, this didn't work and you did this happened, is she going to take the feedback? Probably not. I mean, I could start with like, are you open to feedback? But I don't care. I at this point, I can't trust someone that's going to stand up and encourage something when a person has been questioned to validate something. Like, that's a red flag. So,
yeah.
Like,
and you were
them.
strong enough to see that and to do something, to tell her that and take steps and actually took your own energy back and your power back. Yeah. What would you tell people who are too afraid for that, where that fear to do that is still way too big? But they realize somewhere they know, but they're too afraid to do something.
Yeah, the thing is you have a choice. People in authoritative powers, whether they're celebrities, political people, they're just humans. They're humans, and they are part of the human condition. They're going to fail. But here's the thing that I do is I don't keep it against them. It's like, okay, you failed. You're human. And I bring that into these ideas of like, well, this person is better than me. This hierarchy idea that, this person is ordained by God. That's why they're above me. It's like, no, they're humans. They're humans. Doesn't
So
matter
you
if they're
actually
ordained by God.
you bring the fear down by telling them, making it more realistic to normal life instead of
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Yeah. Don't put them on a pedestal. That's one ideology of self-sabotage. When you put people on a pedestal and they fall short,
Yes.
they fall off that pedestal because that's not where they're actually at. That's not who they are. And then the second part of that is you're on their level. Regarding yourself, having that self-love, having that self-worth, having that self-care to be like, we're on the same level. You're human, I'm human. I mean, this is why I've gotten to hang out with celebrities. This is why I've gotten to hang out with some amazing, brilliant minds. I don't sit there judging them. Like, I charge my car every day. I have an EV. And one of the people just struck up a conversation with him. He's a polymath. He's working with Harvard professors right now on longevity. Like, he's working on the book. I get a sneak peek at all this material before it's published.
Yeah. Good.
And
Cool.
yeah, it's like you never know who someone is unless you start talking to them. And but if I just the guy by his cover and didn't strike up a conversation and didn't have that compassion or that regarding of like, this person is human, I'm going to address them on a human level like I would want to be addressed, I would be missing out big time.
Yeah, but you also put them on a level that's equal at your level instead
Exactly.
of putting them either on a pedestal or whatever, have a judgment, whatever. That's where you say they're human like me, and that's how I can have a conversation on a equal level with them.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if they're homeless, whatever they're dealing with, disabled. Like, when you bring in that humanity, which is really key, bringing in that humanity.
And your heart. That's what I have. That's like a heart connection when you bring in humanity.
Yeah. Then things begin to shift. Then you have an understanding. Then you can have compassion. Then you can have your boundaries. Then you can understand like what's okay and what's not okay, because you bring in these dynamics. Now, that's not to say that I don't have people that I regard highly. I do have people that I highly regard that I absolutely get intimidated by. But when I feel intimidated, I go, why? And let's hang out with them more. They got something that I need more of in my life. If I'm feeling intimidated around them, and not from like a malicious perspective. Maybe they're like really intelligent and I'm just like, whoa, I key into that. I'm like, I want to be your friend.
Yes.
Because I want to know what you have that I don't, because you have something completely different from me and I want to understand that. So,
and it's nothing more and it's nothing less. It's something different.
yes.
And we all have our own qualities, and they might have those qualities very, very, very much. But you have other qualities that makes that you're always equal. Maybe the knowledge is more, or the money is more, or whatever might be more, doesn't mean that as a human being they are more, because we are equal.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. So
nice, great. I love this, Brettney. Thank you already. Hey, what are the 3 challenges that you see people struggle with most before they come to you to work with you?
Their identity, who they are, is really one of the biggest ones. So I wrote the 4 aspects of identity, which I ran by my roommate, who's a Princeton graduate. And so she helped me develop this, which is bridged off of others. As I've researched and keep like learning and research, I found out that another individual has kind of done something close, but mine is completely different, where I had to go, what's missing from me and who I am. So having a lot of alone time, I had a lot of time to form my own ideas, to be my own little rebellious person, but there was still something missing from who I was. And then connecting with that was huge on a whole scale. So that's 1. 2, off of that is knowing how to have proper boundaries. So a lot of people go into the idea of like, an idea, which is a false idea of a boundary being, don't you dare ask me another question. I know you're going to ask me another question. Like, we're here for an interview.
Yeah.
But instead of saying that, if I am uncomfortable, it's like, I'm uncomfortable. I need to leave right now. Same thing, completely different ways of addressing it. And I take my power with what I can do for myself as my boundaries. So if I need a minute, let me have a minute. I can have my minute and I can come back, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I can, from taking my minute, getting myself calm, I can come back and state, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. If this happens again, I need to leave. And then if it happens
also,
again,
yeah,
out, right? So
that's setting boundaries to somebody else, but also boundaries to yourself. It's
yeah,
both sides.
Yeah. And what's most important is setting boundaries to yourself, like knowing how to get out of these situations that conflict with you and that don't gel. And then reconnect. The third part is reconnecting people with their power. Because a lot of times with empaths, they let go of their power. Like they really go following what someone else has said. It's multifaceted in a way when someone's letting go of their power. Like they're not in their purpose. They don't do the things that they're supposed to do. They're a doormat supporter. They're taking care of everyone else instead of going, hey, I get to go take care of myself now. And so that's part of you being in power, which connects with having applicable boundaries, because you need to know your limits, which connects with your identity, you know, who you are. So
yeah, it's one picture. It all belongs together. It works together. So if you lose on one side, the balance is gone, and so you lose another side, and it's gonna be very wobbly, and that's where you really open for trouble, basically.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't remember if I mentioned this, but part of knowing yourself is knowing where you end and others begin, and staying solid in that dynamic. Because a lot of times people are like, I feel anxious. And it's like, hold on, am I an anxious type of person? No. All right. So this is not me. It's something I'm picking up from around, or maybe something is wrong with my diet, or maybe I didn't exercise. You know, it's going through the checklist of like, is this really me? Or, oh no, they're really anxious and I'm picking up on that, you know, so
you actually bring them back to be in contact with their real authentic self.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, that's the core component that restores self-trust when self-trust has been ripped away through the trauma.
Yeah.
So once you reinstate all those things, once you come back to yourself, who you are, acknowledge, hey, I have these gifts now. I have these superpowers, even though it came from trauma. These are things that I can use for great good in the world. These are things that I can use to save lives. That's what, like, that's the goal. That's the dream. Like, how can I impact the world in such a positive way that it just creates this exponential healing? And I mean, really, that's what a person who is a supporter wants to see. They want to see the fruits of what they're doing, instead of seeing like, oh, I did this and now I'm suffering because, you know, I gave so-and-so my lunch or my money because I noticed that they were suffering and I didn't like that suffering. But now I've taken on all the suffering. And it's like, no, you don't have to do this.
Yep.
Like you can set boundaries of, like you can set boundaries of, here's some resources for you. I know that it's been a couple of days since this happened. Here, we can share my lunch. I know I'm good with this amount. Take this so you at least have some sustenance. You know, group together with others, being like, hey, did you know that this is going on? What can we do for them? But that's stepping into your power instead of just kind of doing a martyr dynamic and, you know, that sort of thing. So
great. You told me about the Embolden program.
Yes.
Can you tell more about that?
Yeah, so the Embolden program is all about learning these concepts, learning your divine purpose that has been placed in you, which most kids around the age of 5 say, I want to be this. Yet then that dream is drummed out of them because of society, because of parents, because of guardians, because of school, because of whatever. And they drop their purpose. So I help you reconnect with that authentically in a fun way. And then values. So we establish those first, and then we go into the training of how would you handle these types of people in the world? How do you navigate holidays if it is your family that you're having trauma with, or relationships? How to stop attracting narcissistic people with narcissistic traits into your life? How to set healthy boundaries and not do what I call swing the pendulum, where you put on the armor and just start attacking people because they're a new thing. And you're like, I want to experience this. Now I have boundaries. And you unfortunately go out and start attacking people. I want to limit that because that can cause more pain. And sometimes people with trauma become the abuser. So it's navigating that, having safe spaces for people to learn and grow and to really heal.
And that's a very, very important point, the safe space. Otherwise, it's really, I mean, with the narcissistic experiences that they had with that, the safety feeling is not really there anymore. So so it's great that you design that, whatever, that safe space, because that will be a place to be able to open up and empower.
Yeah. And that is huge, because there are spaces that are safe spaces, but you can't say certain things. Like if you say certain things are going to happen. And it's like, there obviously is a safety line for this, depending on, what's stated, but really I want to create a safe space. So if someone's like, hey, I saw this ghost yesterday, or I'm dealing with certain abilities, like I could totally pick up this person's sorrow. Therapists can look at you like you're crazy. Most of them will, not all of them, but most of them will just be like, and this person's crazy, and not question that, not go into that, like, tell me more about this. How did that feel? And how did you feel with that? So it's creating this safe space where people aren't going to get necessarily punished. Like there is reactive abuse, which is, I haven't looked if this is an actual term in therapy yet, but when a person is pushed to their limit, they're going to shift out of, like, they could be in fight or flight, and that part of fight or flight is not working. Suddenly their brain shifts to a different reaction of fight or flight, which could be rage. Right?
Yes.
So
and that goes like a lot of times, like instantly.
Yeah. So a lot of times there is this perfect victim narrative where a victim has to look this way. And if they, if they are not cowering, if they are not freezing, if they're not fawning, then they're the aggressor. And it's like, no, these are different reactions to fear. They're in a fear state. So if they've reacted in protecting themselves and have to protect themselves physically, I'm not going to count that against them. Now, if this happens over and over and over again, then it's like, we need to go do some deep learning on this. What's really going on here?
Yeah.
So, recognize. And here's the resources that you get to take on, and I'm going to hold you accountable to these because I'm going to be following up with them.
That's very important, to hold them accountable, because that's where change can happen.
Yeah. I mean, when it's something really dangerous, that's something that our culture is lacking out on because it's such little disconnected things. Like you have all these little specialties that are all over the place and they're not talking to each other.
Yep.
How are you to hold a person accountable when they're one way in one situation, a different way in another situation, and a completely different way in another, just to look good in those situations?
Yep.
People with narcissistic tendencies are great at that. Really good at that.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not holding them accountable, which is, by the way, one of the most terrorizing things for a person with narcissistic tendencies, is exposing them, holding them accountable, and embarrassing them.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and for an empath, if you can do that in a safe and humanistic way of, not sitting there trying to like intentionally destroy them. If it's not just like, I'm trying to get away from them and I'm trying to get them to stop this behavior because I care about them, which some people do, to each their own. If they want to make that relationship work, that's their stance. And I'm not going to sit there, you need to get out of this dynamic because they're this. No, it's like, let's figure out how to make this work for you because this is what you want in this moment. I'm not going to say you have to get out of there unless like it's a life or death thing. If it's life or death, it's like, you need to handle this. This is a life or death situation. So different things for different people based on what they're experiencing and what they want.
Yeah, there is not one way, and that's great with you because out of your experience, but also out of everything you learned about it and around it, that's where you really can feel and act on a personal level. I mean, it's really like made for that person.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's very important in a case like that, like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
Yeah.
Great. I can see people really blooming and getting stronger with you, Brettney. Definitely.
Thank you.
So, no, I know you a little bit longer by now, so I know you have not only the power, but also the empathy, but you have that connection. You do that just like that. It's you. It's not a made up thing or a thing you learn. No, that's you. You do have that real heart connection. And I think that's where you can feel and know what people need. And that for this person, it's that, and for that person, it's that. So, and that's why I'm really admiring you. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Brettney, how can people learn about you? How can they find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so obscuram.com is the best place to go. And then I am all over social media. So I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram under my name, TikTok under my name. I have several accounts under my name.
I could find that. Yes, I saw that. Very good. I loved it.
And I am on Twitter under Ye Wenchie. So that's spelled YEWENCHIE, which is the jewelry company that I used to have. So
yeah, you're so creative as well. Are those handmade again or not?
No, these are not. I've been meaning to do some out of lost wax. I just haven't completed it yet. So
yeah, that's one thing I'm jealous about. I mean, she makes her own jewelry, and I mean, I've seen things. I'm kind of like, oh gosh, I want to have that too. It's great. That's why you're like multi-talented, and I love it definitely.
Yeah,
Brettney, if there's one thing to have, like the last thing in this interview, if there's one thing that you want to tell people that you want them to remember, take home, what would that be?
Self-love, self-regard, self-care, self-compassion is key. So many people are dealing with blame, shame, guilt. Once you have self-love and self-compassion, you can take the pressure off. And taking that pressure off, being able to take that deep breath and just like, it's going to be okay. Yeah, I messed up. We all mess up. What do I get to do from here on out is huge. So have the self-love, self-compassion to get yourself out of that very pressurized state and just let it slide off. So, and that's what you're really good at, Carla, is getting people connected to their hearts and getting the stress off. So that's huge.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Definitely.
Brettney, I loved it. I love the interview, and I'm really sure that a lot of people will be very inspired by this. And yeah, I really wish a lot of people that they find their way towards you so you can help them to get out of their situation that they do not like, that they do not want. So
yeah.
Thank you very much, Brettney.
Thank you. I appreciate and value you as well.
You're welcome. Well, that was the interview with Brettney Perr. Very interesting. So, and if you see it on whatever channel you see this, make sure you also go to Brettney Perr's Obscuram and you'll find it there also. And then you find all the rest of the information of Brettney as well. Have a nice day.